We are back on the podcast. Wait a minute. Technology has moved forward.
It has. It's amazing to be seen for what we really are.
It is. That's very sentimental of you.
Yeah.
I suppose it was, yeah.
Sentimental for the old ways of videos and not just podcasts, you know. But it's a podcast world we live in, and
it is,
and it's podcasts that we live and breathe, really, isn't it?
There's over 700,000 podcasts in the world today.
They're not extinct anytime soon. We're just adding more trash.
Not trash. No.
Wow.
Over. Go ahead.
No, sorry.
Over 51% of 51% of homes in America listen to podcasts.
Really?
Yeah. So it's a growing thing. It really is. But I mean, this is going to be in podcast form.
Yeah.
But it's also in video form as well.
So we've got the podcast recording right here.
There you go. Yeah.
You are witnessing how we record podcasts.
Yeah.
It's all phones.
Yeah, we record our podcast on phones. Yeah. Anyway, we are in my living room at the moment. We decided to just switch things up and do a series of like shorter videos where we are talking about more specific things, shorter length of time, so you can watch and listen for a bit more information.
These will be on YouTube,
Facebook,
Yeah. So
and obviously iTunes and Spotify and stuff. Not the video form, of course. I had to say that because he would.
Yes, I would. I would be like, let me stop you right there, Jerome.
We are in my living room. It's quite a nice setup that we've got going on.
I'm Luke Holhouse, by the way, and this is Jerome Amira.
Yes, I love the reverse intro that we've done.
Hasn't crossed your mind, video pod thing. Video podcast. How's that? You do creative, right?
You said podcast.
Was that creative enough?
No.
Okay, well, I think we'll probably start.
How's it crossed your mind? What do we sort of do on the podcast?
We normally talk about sort of the biblical history, ancient history, and trying to focus in on a group of people called the Jews and their journey through time that is happening still. So we're gonna go from past to present. It's probably gonna take a long time, but it's been a long time. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
So today we're just gonna go through. Well, these, so like Jerome said, these videos are gonna be sort of important parts of Jewish calendar. So we're gonna go through events and festivals. We're gonna go through important parts of their history, literature, history,
the music and culture and stuff like that. And also, I think one of my friends suggested that we take a look at the Christian view on toward mental health and stuff like that. So we want to just branch out a bit more on the podcast as well for a few specific things. But yeah, like today we are looking at the Sabbath.
Yes.
What is the Sabbath? We kind of want to stress as well that when you hear that word, if you're not a religious person, you don't have to be put off like, oh, they're just going to talk about loads of religious history. We want to kind of find out why it has meaning to everyone today, the Sabbath, or as the Jews call it, the Shabbat. So first we will define it religiously and talk about who practices it and stuff like that.
So if you're scared of all these religious terms,
skip to the end. Or if you're bored.
Yeah, I mean, it is either or.
But yeah, let's go.
Let's get this bread.
Yeah. So the Sabbath is a time of. Well, you're gonna go. Are you gonna?
No,
start?
it was just a stupid thing to say. To be honest, let's get this bread. It's just Jonathan, my flatmate, will love that.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're catering to the audience.
it's very specific. Right, go for it, Jerome. Let's do it.
The Sabbath is a time of religious observance. The Sabbath is a time of religious observance and abstinence from work, kept by Jews from Friday evening to Saturday evening and by most Christians on Sunday. Now within those two religions you have different kind of denominations or strengths of belief. So that's more of a general definition. But in Judaism you have Orthodox, conservative and liberal, and they all have different takes on the Sabbath. Now Orthodox will practice from Friday evening till Saturday evening. They will basically be very restful, and to the point of, not. So some examples is that they don't switch off lights, switch on lights and stuff like that, which puts into perspective how seriously they take it not to do work that is gonna.
It's not that they're doing work though. It's someone else. They're using someone else's work to then benefit from it
from someone else.
Yeah. So it's the person who's, I was about to say, making the electricity. I don't think they make it, but they're working, so benefiting off that is not good to an Orthodox Jew. But then you've got more conservative beliefs, which are...
I guess conservative would be, it's kind of in the middle, so some people will practice it very seriously. They won't do any work and they'll have a very restful and holy Shabbat or Sabbath.
Yeah.
And then the kind of liberal end of the spectrum is that we found that the kind of attitude is becoming more and more loose because of more modern readings of history, through learning modern education like history and sciences, that has led to a less literal reading of the Torah. So it's kind of open to interpretation, open to perhaps used as a guideline rather than
the strict set of do's and don'ts.
Okay. So they will. I know a few Jewish people who they respect the Sabbath, but they don't necessarily do what the Orthodox Jews do and have a very, very restful Sunday.
Well, rest, but then that leads us on to what is rest itself.
We'll have to touch on that.
Yes. Yeah, we will. Yeah.
So where does the idea of the Sabbath come from?
So it's from the creation story of God creating the world. So 7 days is what 7 periods of time set out the Jewish week, and then also that followed on to what we use as, it's a 7-day week. So on the first 6 days, create the world, fish, separate to animals, the heavens, all of it, and humans. And then the 7th day, he stopped and he just didn't do anything. He rested. So that's where they get that from, and the people were told to use that as like a day of reflection, a day of resting, and sort of making it a holy day. So devoting that day to God.
Interestingly, though, it wasn't until thousands of years later, in Exodus, when God kind of instituted this. So when he gave the commandments to Moses, he said, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord, to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, or your male servant, or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within the gates. For in 6 days Lord made the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." So when God gives a commandment, it's pretty serious.
Yeah, and especially to Moses. He laid down the law, literally.
He literally did lay down the law. Probably where we get that term from.
Maybe, yeah.
Laying down the law, with laying down the tablets.
Do you reckon Moses said that all the time?
Hey fellas, I'm here to lay down the law.
He had an American accent.
I don't know. Yeah,
Hey fellas, I'm here to lay down the law.
Moses. Probably didn't. So
I'm glad you stopped it there because we just kept going.
Carried on doing accents. Obviously, this is so important to the Jewish people, and you can see why. Because God has said these words. He's made this commandment for them to rest. And when he says at the end, when God says, he blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy.
Yeah.
There's words in there that we can just take for granted if for whatever faith you are, or if you're not, of a faith. Words like holy and words like blessed, you kind of like just read them and then forget about what they mean. And the words are very similar because blessed means to make holy, and I guess holiness is a whole nother kind of. You could do a whole episode on what holiness is.
I think to be fair, most of them it's they use that much, aren't they, in the
Yeah.
Bible, that you could do it on most of these terms,
on those
like,
really important
yeah.
terms.
and how deep they go.
Yeah, to give a perspective, then that means that Sunday for Christians, and then Friday evening to Saturday evening for Jews, they have been made holy. So I guess the human response to that is to make yourself holy on those days.
Yeah.
So that's physically resting, but also a day to reflect and just cast off your the material pursuits that you've had, and to devote yourself to the refreshments of the spirit and religious activities. So that could be praying, singing, stuff like that.
Yeah, we recently talked about rest in one of our small groups, and it was more like resting isn't just sort of sitting and doing nothing, but it's making sure that you're, as in, well, for Christians anyway, and Jews as well, resting in God's presence and spirit, and that's where you recuperate. That's where you get all your fight back for the week, ready to go out and do your 6 days of labor, like it says in Exodus, and then just making sure that you're sort of, it's almost like you're grounding it, like you're grounding your week, or you're using that day as like an anchor
to reflect. Yeah,
because I found, like, I think it's almost like having, when you say work for a week, or you have, let's say like school, when you transition from college or sixth form A level to university, it's very strange because it's not rigid weeks.
It's not a routine every day.
And it's not like
3.
you have to be there, because university is more, you should be here, but you're an adult, so you can choose.
You're not accountable.
Yeah, exactly. So, but having that rigidity of a routine makes, I don't know, I always, personally, I find it better for even just sort of I would say your mental health, like your well-being physically and mentally, of like having a routine, making sure that you're sticking to it, and things like that. So having that Sunday of sort of just bring you back to the ground, like.
And I think in Israel, when it comes to Friday evening to Saturday evening, everything is so quiet apparently, and shops close obviously and stuff like that, and you can't really travel. And as far as I know, in Britain, it used to be not as extreme, but on Sundays, places used to be quiet. Sometimes you see it around today in certain towns or cities that things are generally a bit more quiet on a Sunday. And it's weird to think that, in a kind of more and more secular world that we're living in, or even throughout all of history, there's been a respect for a day of the week where things are just more quiet. Even if you take God out of the picture for just a moment, you can kind of see people's need to reflect and just rest for one day in such a busy world. Today.
Even big, shops and things now, like big supermarkets, they close a little bit earlier. People get extra money
times
for working on Sundays. Time and a half or double, if you're fortunate. So, I mean, I think it is ingrained in us, really, isn't it? That it's
it's kind of a religious foundation as well, and that's what the society's been built on. But more and more recently, you've seen shops opening later. I never had double pay when I worked on Sunday, working in a supermarket. I mean,
I didn't, but I've heard people that do.
So that shows the increasing kind of turning away from the traditional religious implementation on society, I suppose. But interestingly, like you mentioned about routine, like it's hard. We live in almost a restless world, especially in the cities where things are open really late. You can order food so instantly. It's kind of where this secular New Age philosophies come in, where rest, routine, mindfulness, meditation, all those things are really good. They're really good to implement, and that's been kind of taken and implemented into people's lives, saying that rest is so good, reflection is so good, and it's been people have do it. They practice kind of restful stuff. They meditate and potentially pray. They just do that apart from God, which is interesting to see. That it's been
that transition.
It's been used like that still today.
Should we move on?
Yeah. Well, no, it's good though because that was.
Oh
part
no,
of it.
yeah, that was a great conversation, and that's what this is all about. Hey,
It is.
I'm glad you could join us. It's like you're sitting on that chair with us, really.
That's why we did it, so you could be in the room with us.
Yeah.
Um,
all 5 million of you.
one day. A question you may be asking or may not be asking is why did God need to rest in the first place? To be fair, I've.
Did it cross your mind?
Has it crossed your mind? I'm just correcting them.
Oh, that's poor form. I'm so sorry. Please continue.
Thank you.
I don't know why I pointed at the watcher / listener. I'm in two
It's
minds
weird
because
it's light. Yeah, go ahead.
we've been podding for so long, and we call them listeners. You know, we call them
viewers.
We call them listeners. We call them. The pod army. No, we've never called them.
Pod army.
So it's weird to say viewers because that is odd.
And it is a kind of a weird concept because no one is watching us at all yet. Potentially.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. They're not even seeing it.
Potentially hundreds of people are watching. So that's kind of a weird thing.
Schrodinger's cat. No, I'll get in trouble for saying that. As a physics person, they'll be like, no, Luke.
We'll discuss that in a new episode.
Sure. We'll have an entire episode on that because it's very important.
Schrodinger's cat.
Yes.
Yeah. Why did God need to rest in the first place? It's something that I've thought about. But I've never really been so passionate about that question because, is God doing that symbolically or anything like that? So, what do you reckon?
I don't know, but there was a big pause there.
It was a big pause.
You just went, and it just said a really normal sentence. I'd say I think it was like a showing it, like leading by example. Like demonstrating how we should be. So instead of it being like, I think we're made in him, in his image, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
And we're a reflection of God. So if God is doing that, then we should do that. We're made in his image. If God's resting, we should rest, even though we know God doesn't need to. He does it on purpose to show us that we should. We have no excuse to
take time out of that particular day. Yeah. And why do you think the purpose is? I know we kind of discussed this, but like, why do you think we have to take that time out? We could just work for 7 days a week and just get on with life. Why do we do that?
I think we can get very caught up in life. I know I can. Like, even some days, some Sundays, very stressed. And like, I'll go to church in the morning, then the afternoon it could be stressed still. But I think it's good to still have that time where you're just devout to God, or having a chill. And I think that's something I really want to try a bit more to do in the future, is make sure that I'm having. I think when you're working, I guess it's a bit easier, but you've still got like stuff to sort out on weekends and stuff, or places to be or whatever. It depends how popular you are. But like, I think having those times of where you get all your stuff done in the week, so that you can have that day to do nothing and just sort of recuperate and things like that. What about you? Why?
I think I was doing a bit of research on this. And
all right.
I know. A lot of interpretation on the Sabbath is that it's a memorial and it's a time that you do spend, that you do practice, largely focused around the things that God has done for us, or the things that God has done for the Jewish people. So, for example, when Israel were redeemed from physical slavery under the Pharaoh in Egypt, it's a time to remember that, where God has brought the people to be thankful. And I guess that's it, is to be constantly remembering what God has done, to be thankful. I can't count the amount of days that I've just woken up and got on with my day, listened to music without actually addressing God, like, thank you for giving me life, thank you for bringing me here. And
easy to get caught up in it, isn't it?
And once and I found that when you don't acknowledge God, your day is just in a in shambles, really.
It's not as good as it could be.
No.
Yeah.
So to acknowledge and be thankful to God is the least we can do, and it's so that I think that's why it's ingrained as a routine. It's like God's like, look, I've saved you from slavery. I've brought you out. I've given you the law. I've given you blessing your people in the nations. So the least you could do is thank me, is remember me.
Yeah.
So I believe that's why it was kind of instituted as well.
Yeah. So so we've talked about the importance of it being for Jews. Mm-hmm. What's the Christian response to the Sabbath?
Yeah. Well, thankfully, we have a Jew to answer that question for us.
We do.
Actually, we do. This guy, this Jewish person from the line of David.
Yeah.
The line of Judah. He comes along about 2,000 years ago.
Roundabout.
Yeah,
roundabout.
And he comes along and he claims to basically be the king of the Jews. He claims to be the Messiah. He claims to be the Son of God.
The Saviour. Naturally, people are skeptical. The Jewish people, the high priests, are so, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and I think some of the Levites and stuff, they're all so skeptical of this man. And so the Christian response to the Sabbath is to be found in Jesus' words, basically. Mm-hmm. So do you want to read? Oh yeah.
From basically 12 to 8 there.
Join me
whilst we're reading. This is in Matthew chapter 12, verse 1 to 8.
At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck ears of corn and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." He said to them, Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests? Or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here, and if you had known what that means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Sorry, if I know what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. I feel like I butchered that a little bit, to be honest.
No, it was coherent, and
thank you
for reading.
Hey, thank you, my eyes.
So
for reading. No,
Amen. I think this is this kind of the scriptures here are timeless, because this is the question we're trying to ask today, but also the Jews ask it about Christians as well. So the Pharisees said to Jesus, look what your disciples are doing. It's not lawful to do that on the Sabbath. Obviously they were getting food for themselves to eat, and the Pharisees were saying, well, you're not allowed to do that. So they were accusing Jesus and his disciples based upon what the law says. And I think Jesus' response is really interesting. He seems to speak with authority. And you know what? He knows the scriptures. He knows the Torah and the Old Testament books, when he says, like, have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and those who were with him? He entered the house of God, so that's the temple, the holy place, and he ate the bread of the presence, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests. Like, Jesus here seems to be speaking above the law. He's saying that, David disobeyed the law, yet he was still God's chosen king. He was still God's king to establish the messianic line. But David broke the law. So surely, if we're going to be held accountable by the law, then how can David still be a
revered
man?
Important figure.
Yeah. So Jesus seems to be saying here that it's almost on the intention of. So he says, "Well, have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than a temple is here." Let's just stop there a second. The temple is the holy place,
Yeah.
and it's the revered place. The temple for the Jews is where the presence of God is. Yeah, here comes this rabbi, this Jesus guy, and he said there's something greater than the temple is here. Or what is he saying? What can be greater than the presence of God? The physical presence of God, surely. So
if only they knew, hey? Who is this guy? He then says he is the...
He says, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. So again, he's elevating himself, saying, look, this law has been given to help you guys, but you can't be bound by the law. He went on from there and entered their synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand, and they asked him, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? So that they might accuse him. He said to them, which one of you who has a sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value is a man than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Then he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And the man stretched it out, and he was restored in healthy order. But the Pharisees went out and conspired against him.
So even in the Sabbath, we should be focusing on what is further in the kingdom and is right.
And also, it's using your God-given conscience to. So, for example, farmer loses their sheep into the pit because the Sabbath suggests tells you that you can't take it out. Do you not take it out?
Well, yeah, I think we've kind of got the thing across though that we wanted to talk about. So to summarise, the Sabbath is a day of rest.
Yeah.
It comes from the creation story, and then was cemented into the culture when Moses was getting given the laws and things from God. It then had a knock-on effect through time to us, where we still go through and have the seventh day of rest. And it still isn't, a big part of our culture. And it's interesting to see how that changes with other religions and beliefs and ways of resting.
And I think to try and summarize Jesus' response to the Sabbath is that rather than being held hostage by the rule of the Sabbath, Jesus says that he gives the example of if the sheep falls into the pit, then what is it good to just leave it or take him out? And then he goes even further and says, if a man is unwell, is it because of the Sabbath, do you not help him? Do you not heal him? Because that will be constituted as work. Jesus says it is better, it is good to heal this man. And when Jesus says good here, he's talking about moral excellence. Like we have to, this is the good thing to do. This is the righteous thing to do is to heal this man. So Jesus is saying that we can't be held almost captive by our own ideas and stuff like that, and rather do what is good. And again, he just makes it so clear when he says that David ate food in the temple where the presence of God is, but Jesus is eating among the disciples, God in flesh, doing
working
to show that we can still live our lives on the Sunday or the Friday to the Saturday evening. We can still live our lives. We can still give honour to God through what we're doing, whether that's working, stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's more than just your actions. It's about the reflection and the prayer and turning to God. Yeah. Well, thank you for watching / listening.
Thank you.
Pod listeners and video watchers. It's a weird term.
Viewers.
We hope this was interesting. We hope you learned something. We hope to even go into these further in the future.
Yeah, please ask your questions as well.
Yeah, and let us know any specific things you might want to look at.
Any topics, anything in the Bible that or any themes or anything like that you want us to discuss,
or historical stuff. We'll see if we can do tie-ins and. Don't give us weird things, but Right. Well, I've been Luke.
I've been Jerome.
Shalom.
Shalom.
And goodbye.
It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad.
Still.
We have to
recorded.
just do a bit of snippage at the end.
It recorded the whole thing.
So did mine.
Sorry.
Cool.
Greetings
Welcome back.
to another episode of Has It Crossed Your Mind?
Right, that is not going to be the intro. I'm sorry, we're
I know.
we're not starting like that.
I don't see the problem here. We did. Are you feeling a bit uncomfortable?
No, I'm just.
Are you leaving?
I'm just going to go and sit down like it's just starting.